Hi, Ramini here. In Chapter 4 of the best-selling book, They Left No Crime Uncommitted, the author describes how quickly your pretended friends show their true yellow colors when threatened by government terrorists. This is nothing new. In Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, people willingly lied on their family members to save their own cowardly skins. Governments maintain control of their slaves by instilling perpetual fear in the populace. First, it was nuclear war with Russia, then foreign terrorists, and now, China, climate change, COVID-19, domestic terrorists and white supremacists. People who want freedom from government tyranny are not terrorists and they are not white supremacists. Neither Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, the Taliban, or even bin Laden terrorized me. What terrorizes us on a daily basis is fear of IRS audits and seizures, police traffic stops and shootings, midnight raids by government goon squads, FBI surveillance for complaining to schools about critical race theory, and fines and imprisonment for not wearing a mask or taking the jab. The real terrorists are government terrorists. They follow the advice of Karl Marx: accuse others of what you are.
Chapter 4: Friends versus Government Terrorism. In a totalitarian state, your property can be confiscated in one fell night, wrote the Russian author and dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn in his book, The Gulag Archipelago. What is most important in life isn't property, he wrote. It is your friends who are your greatest treasure, and they should be valued more than anything else. But it is not until a person winds up in jail that he discovers who his real friends are, and who his pretended friends were. Two of my real friends were my cousin James Walker, and my warehouse manager Larry Bolin. They tirelessly performed legal research on my behalf, interviewed witnesses, and consulted with outside attorneys and others for advice. Unfortunately, anyone in this so-called free country who has the temerity to stand up for his rights, or assist anyone in asserting theirs, is a prime target for a government boot in the face. Larry's terrorization began when federal agents followed him everywhere he drove. His physical surveillance ended only after he confronted them and threatened a lawsuit for stalking and intimidation. Meanwhile, the surveillance of James Walker ended only after he skidded his truck to a halt and angrily approached the trailing federal agent in the middle of the street. Weighing 260 pounds and with the temperament of an enraged Brahma bull, Big Jim Walker pounded on the window of the agent's car and yelled at him. The cowardly agent, which 99% are, sped away. Next, government terrorists investigated the friends of Walker and Bolin. To my knowledge, neither Walker, Bolin, nor their friends had committed any crimes. Nevertheless, some of their friends were arrested on trumped-up charges. One of them, a very elderly man, was sentenced to 60 years in prison for threatening the judge. The alleged threat was to use legal means to remove him from the bench for not upholding his oath to defend the Constitution. Others, who could have given favorable testimony about me, quickly distanced themselves after being terrorized. One was Barry Ford, a neighbor, and my handyman. He had a key to my house and ate at my dinner table dozens of times. I gave his kids $900 gifts every Christmas and paid him a generous $15 an hour for his labor. I had even given him a $10,000 truck as a bonus for building a vault in my basement. But once I was arrested and rendered penniless by the seizure of my property, I was forced to call him collect from jail and ask for $10 to buy stamps. He refused. 2 days later he put a collect call block on his phone. My secretary, who was also my girlfriend, expressed her eternal love for me days before my arrest. She'd finally found her soulmate, she said, and wanted to get married. 5 days after my arrest I was her sold-out mate. She had signed a cooperation agreement with the government to help prosecute me. In exchange for not prosecuting her as a co-conspirator for selling business books, she agreed to testify against me, to consensual monitoring of my communications with her, to waive any speedy trial rights, and to become a government informant for the rest of her life. An additional inducement for her cooperation was an unwritten agreement allowing her to keep all the expensive jewelry I had given her. Although it's illegal for anyone to bribe witnesses with anything of value, the courts have ruled that it's a-okay for the government to do so, strictly in the interests of justice, naturally. This heinous practice motivates witnesses to lie and has led to the corruption of the entire judicial system. It was temporarily banned in 1998 by a 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling in Singleton v. United States, but was reinstated by an en-banc panel that overruled the 3-judge panel. The 98% conviction rate in federal cases depends entirely on perjury and sham trials, or coerced confessions. Most defendants plead guilty because they know they can't win. I had written to my girlfriend and advised her to tell the truth. I wasn't afraid of the truth. Selling books wasn't a crime, and I didn't want her to get into any trouble. However, it wasn't long before she decided to go one step further, to lie for the government. It is painful to be betrayed by those you care about, but in a way it was a relief to not have to worry about her. Besides, my newly acquired friends weren't afraid to help me. While Bobby Barfield was still in jail with me, his girlfriend Donna King had been driving 200-mile round trips to my home and back to Macon 3 times a week to feed my starving Rottweilers. Then, the dogs were arrested. It was the government's intention to break my will to resist by depriving me of everything: freedom, property, a lawyer, friends, and now even my dogs. Walton County Animal Control dognapped all 4 Rottweilers right off my property, without my permission. Luckily, the charges against Barfield had been dropped and both he and Donna King retrieved them from the dog pound only days before they were to be executed. But to get them back, Walton County demanded a $700 ransom for housing them for 30 days. Robertson also had the 2 houses I owned arrested under the in rem forfeiture swindle. However, since they couldn't be hauled off or pocketed like everything else, he put a lien on them so they couldn't be sold, transferred, or borrowed against. It was a means of preventing me from hiring a decent lawyer or making bail. Yet, because the 2 houses had not yet been forfeited, they were still my property. Accordingly, I allowed Bobby and Donna to move in to prevent them from being damaged by vandals or destroyed by fire. They visited me in jail, did legal research, talked to witnesses and lawyers, and sent me $30 per week. Then, they were placed under tight surveillance. Their investigation began after a hostile neighbor named Adams, a neighborhood informant, phoned Robertson with the news that someone was living in my house. Robertson and his crony came speeding up my driveway, screeching their tires and almost crashing into the house. It was their intention to intimidate the occupants. In a stroke of luck, my oldest and meanest Rottweiler, descriptively named Bear, immediately lunged at Robertson as he stepped out of his car. "Good dog." Robertson reached for his gun, but it snagged on the holster. If not for the fact that Barfield came out in time to yell at Bear to sit, Robertson's larynx would have been completely ripped out. Bad timing, Bobby. Agent Robertson demanded to know who they were, and why they were living in my house. Bobby and Donna told them that I gave them permission, and Robertson step and fetch it dutifully logged their names and social security numbers into his IRS investigative report. Their names were run through government computers, and this was followed up with physical surveillance wherever they went. On 2 occasions, Bobby and Donna were further terrorized by government helicopters hovering just feet above the house, rattling windows, and knocking dishes in the floor. This was simply a message from Robertson's terrorist gang to not get involved. Later, once they discovered that federal snoopers were privy to their phone conversations, not merely my monitored calls from jail, Donna spoke to the head of security at Bell South. After receiving her promise to not say anything so he wouldn't lose his job, he confirmed that the phones were indeed tapped, illegally, of course. If they had been legally tapped, the government would have had to provide evidence of the court order that authorized it before trial. They didn't. Up until this confirmation, I had only suspected that they were using the technology they have had since World War II, the ability to eavesdrop on Americans by listening to household conversations even when a phone receiver is still on the hook. Hint: unplug your home phone before talking in a room unless you want government snoopers to listen in. Also, put your mobile phone in another room before talking because they can turn on the microphone and the camera whenever they want to. Despite the government's terror campaign, Bobby and Donna continued to help me. They contacted an attorney in Macon who agreed to see me for a free consultation at Bibb County Jail. She was young, black, and female. No problem. She wanted $100,000 to take the case. Big problem. She had a mohawk haircut. which was another big problem. I figured the only thing worse would be a punk rocker with rainbow hair, a dirty nose ring and a safety pin in her cheek as my attorney. But I was wrong.